How ancient humans defended their children from deadly predators tonight. You'll check the locks. You'll glance at the baby monitor. You'll close the bedroom door, just a little. You never question it. It feels instinctive. But this ritual is not new. It is not modern. It is the last echo of a war that lasted 2 million years. A war fought not with alarms and cameras, but with fire, spears, and the sound of the human voice in the dark. Because for most of our history, we were not the top of the food chain. We were the meal, and nothing was more vulnerable than a child. This is the story of how our ancestors kept their children alive, long before weapons, before walls, before the word safety even existed. It begins over 2 million years ago, on the open grasslands of Africa. Here, a small, upright creature called Homo habilis walked among giants, saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, crocodiles twice the size of today's, and leopards, silent, patient, and devastating. Scientists studying ancient skulls have found something chilling, puncture marks that match, almost perfectly, the teeth of an ancient leopard. One skull belonged to a young hominin, likely dragged from its group and killed in an ambush. Fossil evidence from South Africa's Drymalin cave shows leopards, hyenas, and other predators living side by side with early humans, hunting the same ground, competing for the same prey. Sometimes that prey was us. There is even a famous case, still debated by scientists, of a young Australopithecus skull found in South Africa, the Tong child. Some researchers believe the damage on its skull matches the talons of a giant eagle. Others disagree, but the theory itself tells us something important. Even the sky was not safe. Early hominins had no fire, no weapons beyond a stick or a stone. What they had was numbers and vigilance. Children stayed close, adults stayed alert. Survival was a group project, every hour of every day. Then something changed the rules of the game. Fire. Archaeological evidence from sites like Wonderwort Cave in South Africa suggests early humans were controlling fire roughly 1 million years ago. This wasn't just about warmth. It wasn't just about cooking. It was a wall, invisible, flickering, and alive. Most predators fear open flame. A fire at the mouth of a cave or at the center of a camp created something our ancestors had never had before. A safe circle. Inside it, children could sleep. Outside it, the darkness still belonged to the predators, but it no longer belonged to them completely. Researchers who study early fire use suggest one of its central purposes wasn't cooking meat faster. It was protecting it, and protecting the people eating it from being ambushed while a carcass was consumed over days. A slow-burning fire meant a family could linger over a kill without becoming one themselves. For a small child, this fire likely represented the first true architecture of safety. Not stone, not wood, light. But fire alone could not follow a family into the open grasslands or protect them while they searched for food. They needed something they could carry. At a site called Kathupan in South Africa, archaeologists uncovered stone-tipped spear points dated to roughly 500,000 years ago, nearly 200,000 years earlier than anyone expected. This is known as hafting, attaching a sharpened stone to a wooden shaft. At Schöningen, in Germany, researchers found something even more astonishing. Wooden spears, almost 300,000 years old, with their tips deliberately hardened in fire. Some of them show signs of being used, damaged, and carefully resharpened. These were not disposable tools. They were maintained, valued, passed down, hand to hand. This is where the story turns. A sharpened stick could kill an attacker. But it also meant something greater. It meant an early human, a parent, no longer had to run at the first shadow in the grass. They could stand their ground. Distance was survival. A spear thrown rather than thrust kept a hunter or a defender outside the range of claws and teeth. Bone evidence from African sites shows that early humans were using this technique, throwing weapons at dangerous animals by roughly 90,000 years ago. Some researchers argue the technology may be even older, though this remains debated. For a parent standing between the child and a lion, that difference, a few extra feet, was everything. As tens of thousands of years passed, humans stopped merely reacting to predators. They began outthinking them. Camps were built with awareness. Caves were chosen not just for shelter, but for defensibility. A narrow entrance was easier to guard than an open plain. Ethnographic studies of more recent hunter-gatherer societies, such as groups in the Kalahari, describe a pattern likely far older than written history. Children sleeping at the center of the group, surrounded by a ring of adults who took turns staying awake through the night. It wasn't a formal watch schedule. It was instinct, sharpened into culture. Storytelling may have played its own quiet role here. Long before written language, oral traditions likely carried warnings disguised as stories, which animals to fear, which sandals meant danger, which places to avoid after dark. A frightened child who remembered the story was a child less likely to wander. This is one of the most overlooked defenses our species ever developed. Not a weapon, not a wall, memory. Then came a shift that changed everything again. Cooperation on a larger scale. As human groups grew, so did their ability to intimidate predators simply by numbers and noise. Loud, coordinated shouting could drive off a hyena pack or a curious lion. Fire could be carried on torches, extending the safe circle beyond the camp itself. And weapons kept evolving. Stone points became sharper. Spear throwers extended range even further. Eventually, in later millennia, the bow and arrow would let a hunter or a guardian strike from a distance no predator could close in time. Each invention meant the same thing, again and again, more space between a child and a claw. By the time humans began building permanent settlements, thousands of years ago, something remarkable had happened. The predators that once hunted us regularly, the cave lions, the giant hyenas, many of the great saber-toothed cats were gone, extinct, or pushed to the margins of the world. Not because they got weaker, because we got smarter and we got closer to each other. The instinct did not disappear when the danger did. It simply changed shape. The fire at the mouth of the cave became the porch light left on overnight. The spear became the locked door. The whispered warning story became the safety lecture before a first bike ride. The ring of watchful adults became the modern habit of checking again and again that a sleeping child is still breathing. We like to believe that anxiety about our children's safety is a modern invention, a product of news headlines and smartphones, but the truth is older and stranger than that. It is written into puncture marks on fossilized skulls. It is written into fire-hardened spear tips, sharpened and resharpened by hands that have been dust for hundreds of thousands of years. It is written into the simple universal act of a parent glancing toward a sleeping child one more time before turning off the light. 2 million years ago, that glance might have meant the difference between life and a leopard's jaws. Today, the predators are gone, the instinct never left, and maybe that's the real story here. Not that ancient humans were vulnerable, but that they were determined enough to turn sticks into spears, caves into fortresses, and fear itself into the very thing that would one day let their children, and eventually all of us, sleep through the night.